Boeing spent 13 years and over $30 billion building what might be the single greatest engineering achievement in commercial aviation, a jet so advanced its wings literally fold up after landing. And yet, not a single airline in America wants it. Delta said no, American said no, United said no. 0 US orders. Meanwhile, halfway across the world, one airline alone has bought 270 of them. That is neither a typo nor a coincidence. Something happened in the airline industry over the last decade, something that subtly changed the rules of long-haul flying, and Boeing's biggest, newest jet might be the most expensive casualty of that shift. Or it might just be parking in the wrong country. Stick around, because by the end of this, you'll understand exactly why a plane this good can still be a plane nobody at home wants to buy. First up, let's talk about what this plane actually is, because honestly, it's some wild engineering. The 777X is Boeing's replacement for, and step up from, the legendary 777-300ER, which has been the workhorse of long-haul aviation since April 2004. The new jet comes in two main versions initially, the 777-8 and its freighter variant, and the bigger 777-9, and it's powered by the GE9X engine, which is officially the largest jet engine ever built for a commercial aircraft, for now at least. We're talking a fan diameter of about 340 centimeters, or 134 inches. If you include the nacelle, the outer casing of the engine, it's actually larger than the entire fuselage of a Boeing 737. You could literally fit a small car inside the engine intake. But size isn't the headline here, efficiency is. The GE9X runs at a pressure ratio of 60:1, the highest of any commercial engine ever made. Combining this with a new composite wing, Boeing says the 777-9 burns somewhere between 10 and 20% less fuel per seat than the old 777-300ER, while carrying more passengers, typically around 426 in a two-class layout versus roughly 396 on the older jet. Those are some impressive figures, and ever more important in an age of rising fuel prices and pressures on consumer disposable income. And then there's that party trick. The wingspan, fully extended, stretches to about 235 feet, way too wide for most airport gates. So Boeing thought way outside the box and gave it folding wingtips. The outer 6.5 feet of each engine hinges vertically upward after landing, so the jet can squeeze into the same gate space as the old 777. As a pilot, to be honest, the first time I saw the animation, I thought it was a joke. I was skeptical about how it could work in reality. But it exists. It's certified to fold automatically, and it's one of the coolest pieces of engineering in commercial aviation right now. So on paper, this jet should be flying off the shelves both at home and abroad. So why isn't it? Here's where it gets messy, and where most of the no orders mystery actually starts to make sense. The 777X was originally supposed to enter service way back in 2020. Instead, the program's been hit with one delay after another. People look at the Chinese C929 coming from Comac and mock it for being delayed, but Boeing has proven they're not to be outdone on missing deadlines. There were cracked structural components in the test fleet, engine durability issues with the GE9X, extra scrutiny from regulators after the 737 MAX crashes, which made the FAA far less willing to rubber stamp anything Boeing builds, and then a machinist strike on top of all that. The result? First deliveries have slipped from 2020 to 2022 to 2025, and Boeing now predicts that the very first 777-9 will be handed over sometime in 2027, with broader deliveries coming later that year. That's already 7 years late, and we may not have seen the end of the delays yet. Now here's the twist you might not expect. The launch customer, the airline that gets the very first jet, isn't a proud American carrier, or even a flashy Gulf mega airline. It's Lufthansa. The German flag carrier has 27 of these on order across both passenger and freighter versions. In May of 2026, the very first fully outfitted production 777-9 took off from Boeing's Everett factory in Washington, completing its maiden flight before heading off for final testing ahead of that Lufthansa handover. So the plane's real, and it's flying in production form. It feels close. But for years, it simply did not exist as a deliverable product, and that single fact explains a huge chunk of why American carriers have stayed away. You can't seriously plan your fleet around a jet whose delivery date keeps sliding into the distance. And if you want to know just how brutal this program's journey has been, here's a story that barely made headlines outside of aviation circles, but it's wild. In August 2024, one of Boeing's 4 777-9 test aircraft, tail number November 779 X-Ray Yankee, flew a routine 5.5-hour test flight from Kona Airport in Hawaii back to the mainland. Nothing unusual, just another data gathering flight. But during scheduled maintenance afterward, engineers found something somewhat terrifying. A component called a thrust link, a heavy titanium part whose entire job is effectively to hold the G9X engine onto the wing, had snapped clean in half mid-testing. To put that in perspective, the thrust link's role is to transfer the enormous power to the airframe and propel the aircraft forward. Each one is rated to handle over 21,000 pounds of engine weight and roughly 135,000 pounds of forward thrust. That's the equivalent of holding back the force of multiple freight trains. And it broke. Boeing immediately grounded its entire 4-jet test fleet, inspected the other aircraft, and found cracks forming in the same component on 2 more of them. The cause turned out to be an unexpected high-frequency vibration pattern, a harmonic resonance nobody had modelled for, created by the sheer scale of the G9X itself. That single snapped part paused the entire flight test campaign for months, on top of a 7-week machinist strike that hit Boeing's Pacific Northwest factories the same year. And as if that wasn't enough, in January 2026, inspectors found yet another issue, this time cracking in the G9X mid-seal, discovered during a routine borescope inspection. Boeing says that one shouldn't delay deliveries further, but it's a reminder of just how unforgiving it is to build the largest jet engine ever made. Here's the number that really puts it in context. The original 747, one of the most ambitious aircraft ever built, went from launch to airline service in under 4 years. The 787 Dreamliner, a completely clean sheet design, took about 8.5 years, though it was plagued with initial production and safety issues. The 777X? Well, currently it's 14 years and counting, and it's not even a new airframe from scratch. It's a heavily reworked version of a jet Boeing already knew how to build. That tells you everything about how hard this program has fought just to get to the runway. But delays alone don't fully explain it, because despite everything, airlines around the world have still placed roughly 500 orders for the 777X family. So why is the US order book looking so lonely? Let's go carrier by carrier, because each one has its own specific reason, and together they paint a picture of an industry that's quietly changed its mind about what the future of long-haul flying looks like. I'll start with Delta. Delta's long-haul strategy now revolves around the Airbus A350 and the A330neo, feeding passengers into partner hubs in places like Amsterdam, Paris, and Seoul. Delta's older 767-300ERs have been getting cabin refurbishments, so there's no burning need to replace them with anything, let alone with a brand new jet that won't even be available until the back end of this decade. Interestingly, in early 2026, Delta did place a fresh widebody order with Boeing, but it went with the 787-10, not with the 777X, specifically for slightly shorter international routes while keeping Airbus as the long-haul backbone. Then there's American. American's recent strategy, laid out in its own 2026 filings, is all about debt reduction, retrofitting its existing 777 and 787 fleets with new premium seating, and expanding narrowbody jets like the A321XLR. American is actually considered the most likely US carrier to eventually order the 777X, since its 777-300ERs and 777-200ERs will need replacing at some point. But eventually is the key word. Right now, the focus is on squeezing more value out of what they already own. And then we have United. United has leaned hard into the 787 Dreamliner and the A350 for its widebody future, operating 787-10s and 777-300ERs with around 350 seats. The 777-9, with its even larger seat count, doesn't slot neatly into United's current network plans, especially when a 6-year delivery delay means any order placed today wouldn't even show up until the early to mid-2030s. Put simply, the 777X arrived right in the middle of a window where Delta, American and United had already locked in their long-haul plans around the A350 and the 787. The 777X isn't bad by any stretch. It's just much like the story of my life. It was late to a party where everyone else already had a date. But look again, and you'll see there's a bigger trend underneath all of this, and it's the part that should worry Boeing more than any single airline's order book. For decades, the long-haul playbook was simple. Big planes, big hubs, connect everything through a handful of mega airports. That's the model the original 777-300ER was built for. But over the last 10 to 15 years, US carriers in particular have shifted hard towards point-to-point flying. Smaller, more efficient jets like the 787 and the A350 let airlines fly directly between mid-sized cities without funneling everyone through giant hubs. More frequency and flexibility, less risk if demand on one route softens. It's the same primary reason no US carrier ever added the Airbus A380 to their fleets, and if you hit the link in the top right corner, you can see my video about exactly that. The 777-9, with its roughly 426 seat capacity, caters more for that old model. It makes the most sense when you've got a hub that needs to move enormous numbers of people through 1 or 2 daily mega flights, and honestly, that's not really the US anymore. But it is absolutely the model for a handful of carriers who've built their entire businesses around it. So who is actually buying? Well, this is where the story flips completely, because outside the US, the 777X order book is stacked. Emirates alone has ordered 270 of these jets, more than double the next biggest customer, making it by far the single largest order in the program's history. Qatar Airways has ordered around 150 across the family too. Add in Singapore Airlines with 31, Cathay Pacific, ANA, Korean Air, Lufthansa with its 27, Etihad with 25, and even Saudi carriers, and you've got close to 500 jets on order globally, spread across roughly a dozen airlines. Why does it work for them and not for Delta or United? Well, because Emirates and Qatar run the purest hub and spoke models on the planet. Every single one of those 777-9s is designed to land in Dubai or Doha, dump 400 plus passengers, and feed them onto dozens of connecting flights to Europe, Africa, Asia, and the Americas. The bigger the plane, the more efficient that hub becomes. It's the exact opposite of the US point-to-point philosophy, and for these carriers, it doesn't represent a compromise at all, quite the opposite, it's their entire business model. There's also the cargo angle. Boeing has a freighter version, the 777-8F, which has already picked up over 50 orders, mostly from cargo heavyweights. Even that program has been pushed back, now expected around 2028, but it shows the appetite for big haulers isn't gone, it's just concentrated outside passenger aviation in the US. So where does that leave Boeing? Honestly, in a better spot than the doom and gloom headlines might suggest, but still walking a tightrope. The good news first. As of spring 2026, the 777X program has actually been picking up fresh orders, including a batch of 28 more jets from an unnamed customer earlier this year, part of Boeing's best opening 4 months for orders since 2014. The first production jet is flying. Lufthansa's delivery is finally, actually, maybe, hopefully, close. And after years of nothing but bad news, the program has real momentum again. The not so good news: Boeing has had to pull dozens of 777X orders from its backlog over the years due to certification delays, and the freighter version just slipped again to 2028. Every year of delay is a year competitors get to lock in the A350, which Airbus has been delivering consistently while Boeing was still stuck in testing. And here's the main thing for the US market specifically. American Airlines remains the one to watch. Its 777 fleet will need replacing at some point, and when American does finally sit down and make that call, probably sometime later this decade, the 777X will be a real, flying, deliverable aeroplane, instead of just a PowerPoint slide. And that changes the conversation completely. So here's where we land. The 777X isn't a failure, or some white elephant gathering dust. It's a genuinely incredible piece of engineering, just one that, with all of its delays, is arriving at exactly the wrong time for the US aviation market, at a time when US carriers are pivoting towards smaller and more flexible jets, such as the 787 and the A350. For carriers built around mega hubs like Emirates and Qatar, Singapore, even Lufthansa as the launch customer, the 777X is exactly what they ordered, literally. Almost 500 of them, in fact. So will a US carrier ever order the 777X? Well, the answer is probably, eventually, with American being the best bet. But for now, as things stand, Boeing's biggest, shiniest, newest jet seems to have found a home everywhere except home. Drop your prediction in the comments. Is a US carrier going to order it? And if so, which one do you think is going to be first? And subscribe and share for more deep dives into the stories shaping the skies. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.